All right, so let's talk linked lists.
So two things in arrays was only memory incompatibility and
Yep. So arrays we're going to say they're fast, but they're memory inefficient.
But they were saying if you have to add arrays is the best option to choose.
Okay, well, so something I told you last class is don't necessarily view linked lists as being upgrades to arrays and vice versa.
Yeah.
They are two different tools that solve a similar problem, but the way they solve the problem is different, and therefore you want to pick the right tool for the job. So we can invert these two guys. So right off the bat for a linked list, we can say these guys are relatively slow. And the word relatively is important there because computers are really fast. Realistically speaking, you are not going to notice the difference between an array and a linked list at the human level. You know, our measurement of time, they're going to feel the same, even though under the hood, technically linked lists are slower. Okay, so they're relatively slow, but they are memory efficient. And we can say this, we can say these guys do not require contiguous memory. Okay, they do not require contiguous memory. So going back to here, we saw that if we needed to get to bucket 3 of our array, as long as we knew where our array began, we could calculate where bucket 3 was, right? We could just go there. With linked lists, they don't work that way. So with a linked list, let's just draw a picture. So here, we'll create let's say we write our own linked list up here. Linked list LL is equal to a new linked list. Okay. And what that's going to do is we're going to have this variable down here called head. That's part of our linked list. And just for the sake of consistency here, we'll say that this guy starts off at memory address 100. Okay. So the beginning of our linked list is at memory address 100, but our head, this guy here, is actually something called a node. It's not just an integer. So if we want to hold integers, what we're also going to have is we're going to have a couple different classes here. So we're going to have a node class, and a node knows how to hold the value, the payload of that node. And it also knows about the next node, the next guy in the list. All right, so to have a linked list, we don't just have clean integers in a row. So if we're talking about this guy here, this is an integer, this is an integer, this is an integer. They don't need to be anything more than that because we know exactly where they reside. We know where they live. They live right next to each other in memory. Okay? But with a linked list, they don't necessarily live right next to each other in memory. So if I steal this, we come down to our linked list picture here. This guy might live here. This guy might live here. This guy might live somewhere else. So these numbers, this might be 213. This might be 191. Just kill off a couple of these guys. Maybe this is 311, something like that. All right, let's take off the bottom guy here. Those buckets don't necessarily make sense. Okay, so now you have this situation where, wrong guy there, where the head of our list points to this node. This node points to this node. Which points to this node, which points to this node. So that's kind of how our list ends up getting put together. That make sense? All right. So we have each of these nodes has a value in it. So this might be the value 3, this might be the value 7, 12, -4, or something like that. So a linked list, we keep track of the front of the list in a variable called head. All right, and then we add something to our list. So we start talking about the abilities of our linked list. So we might have something called add front, add end, add at index, remove front, remove end, remove at index. Make sense? Okay. So what we want to do tonight is we're going to write a linked list. Well, you're gonna help me write it because I don't really know what I'm doing. All right, so you're going to help me do this. And that's going to give you what you need in preparation for your next homework assignment. Your next programming assignment is, well, let's see. It's hard compared to your first programming assignment, but it's really easy compared to your next homework assignment, your next programming assignment. So prepare to spend a lot of time on your programming assignments in here, but I promise you that it'll be worth it. You'll get something good out of it. Okay, but they're not easy. I don't know. Did you feel like the programming assignments were easy in 835 or 535? Were the easy assignments? Well, you had me for 535.
Yeah.
My assignments are never
At that
easy.
time, they were not easy at all. Now it's a little bit okay.
All right, so let's, and why don't we go ahead and we'll write this in Android, because we're going to be making our, yep. Let's see, pop open Android Studio here. So one of the reasons I like to do live programming is not only you get to see the answer, but you also get to see, I'll go ahead and actually run these updates just so I'm definitely running the same version as you're running. So you get to see the process I go for solving the problem. Because I spend a lot of time back here drawing pictures. And then I go and write the code that matches that picture. You have to do that. All right? All of us have to do that when they're programming. There's a lot of complex things that I can just do in my head. I don't really need to draw pictures. But eventually I have to draw a picture. You know, a problem gets complex enough that I just, I'm not just to infinity that I can just do it all in my head. I eventually have to draw a picture. And when you start dealing with things like this, where you have a lot of moving pieces and next nodes and things like that, it really helps to draw your pictures. Okay. Do not ask me again. Exit. Didn't I just do that? Oh, it's in the process of exiting. I get it. Here, while that guy's cooking, let's go ahead and start architecting our linked list. So these are the things that a linked list can do. Our linked list class needs to have a node called head that knows about the front of the list. Okay. Then it's going to have all of these functions built into it. So actually, let's just use it here. So node head, this is a field. All these guys are methods. Okay, so that's what's going to go into our linked list.
Do we have to read time complexity as well?
Do you have to read time?
Complexity was like too much with empty list and things like that.
Well, it depends what you're using them for. In general, I would say no, you don't have to worry about time complexity. Run that update now too. So time complexity is really a problem that is involves the type of algorithm you're performing. So the example I usually use in the first class, the 535 class, is we usually add some fractions. And one of the, so if you try to add fractions using cross multiplication to get a common denominator, and then you want to reduce the fraction, you have to get a common divisor. If you don't use the Euclidean algorithm, greatest common divisor for Euclidean algorithm, it's like really, really, really slow. And I use that as a very interesting problem because you think about if I'm going to add two fractions to each other, like 1/2 plus 1/4, that seems pretty easy, right? You take the 2 and the 4, you multiply them together, common denominator is 8. You do your cross multiplication, add them together, you got your answer, right? So, but when you go to reduce that, it's actually very, very slow. And so I usually create a scenario where you add a whole bunch of fractions together, then you reduce it, and it's a program that looks like it should be pretty simple, that takes a week to run. It's incredibly slow because the time complexity of determining the greatest common divisor of two large numbers is very expensive. So that's where the Euclidean algorithm comes in, and it makes things a lot slower, or a lot faster rather. So situations like that are where time complexity makes a difference. So usually you'll get slapped in the face when you know you have to pay attention to time complexity. You'll be doing something, you won't really know why it's going so slow. You'll investigate it to some level and realize, okay, well, what I have written is right. But there's a level of mathematics going on here that is making my solution slow. A majority of the time, we can rely on the fact that our computers are so fast that even our most inefficient solution will be fast enough. That makes sense? So generally speaking, for beginning programmers, well, not just beginning, all programmers, I usually say write code that makes sense to you. Don't write code that you think is more efficient. Don't strive to write efficient code. Strive to write accurate code that's easy to read. Every now and then, you'll have to pay more attention to write efficient code. That make sense? Okay. So let's just dump that slide now since I added it to the other one. So a node is going to keep track of its payload, and we'll make this guy private. A node is also going to have its next node, which means that we need to have some getters and setters, accessors and mutators. So we're going to have a get payload, set payload, get next node, set next node, something like that. Okay. All right. Let's go ahead and kill that guy. Let's create a new Android Studio project. And we're going to call this guy CSC537 Fall 2016 linked list. Okay. And yep, that'll work. And I'll target that one, so we'll just hit next. And I like to do it as a completely empty activity. The tutorial you looked at might have had you do a basic, but I like empty. So if you're... It was empty? Okay. All right, and they give you your what your first activity, usually main activity works out okay, but sometimes I change it, but we'll just leave it as main activity. Now, before I actually click next on this, let's talk about something. I think I mentioned it last time. Didn't we talk about design patterns? And we talked about model view controller. Okay, so here's MVC. This is the controller. This is the view. The layout file is our view. The main activity code, the Java file, is going to be our controller for that view. Make sense? All right, so we're seeing MVC in action there. All right, and then let's go ahead and let's just run this guy and make sure all our stuff is running okay. I'll run it on Nexus 5. We'll say use for future launches. Okay. There we go. So there's our hello world. Okay.
I got it
Well, maybe because yours was yours Nexus 5. That's fine. So I mean, this just has a skin on it because when you choose one of the default emulators, it puts a skin on it. So
After emulator, there was another thing we need to choose.
the Haxum,
Yeah,
yeah, that's
to downloading.
yeah, mine's already set up. Yeah, so the Haxum makes it a lot faster.
Yeah, I was not able to. Then I start downloading few, and you start saying, "Hey, your CPU is something."
You have an AMD CPU.
Yeah, AMD something.
You don't have an Intel processor in your computer. You have an AMD processor.
Yeah.
You're screwed.
My one told me to on the virtual technology and to go to my BIOS settings and on it and then.
Yeah,
So
you might be able to do that. Yeah, because there is the Haxum thing is an Intel product, and it works specifically with your Intel processor.
so I have to change it.
Well, he mentioned, so you have an AMD processor in yours as well? Huh?
Intel.
Oh, he has an Intel. Okay, so yours was a different problem.
Yeah, mine.
Yours was a BIOS virtualization issue. Yeah. So I think there is a workaround for yours, but you might not be able to use the emulator. So with that in mind, well, you can use the emulator. It'll just be slow. It won't launch as fast as mine just launched.
I don't want AMD then.
Yeah, it'll just be slow. Okay, so in any case, there's our hello world. When we go over here to our app, under our resources guy here, here's our layout. So this is our view. This is where we keep our view stuff. Over here, there's our code for our main activity. Okay, so let's just spend a couple of minutes here messing with Android, just to kind of show you the way I usually will do things in Android. So I'm going to open up that layout here.
Exactly. This is what I saw.
Okay. Now I usually, when I'm working on the layout, I'll minimize that guy down there just to give me a little more screen real estate, especially when I'm up on the projector like this and I've lost a lot of my resolution on my computer. So I'll go ahead and spread that apart there. I'll actually need some of that, so let me go like that. Okay. So they're kind of showing me here what, actually let me, is there a different way to view this? I don't want this guy there, but whatever. It'll be fine. We'll just keep going. So I'm going to go ahead and dump the hello world thing here. We don't want that in there. So in your tutorial, did they have you do anything with like text fields or anything, reading stuff in?
Text field and a button.
Okay.
Something.
Okay. So right now we have this relative layout that's in there. I almost always work with linear layouts. So I'll right off the bat take that relative layout and I'm going to throw a vertical linear layout in there. Stretch it all the way to the top, all the way to the side. Okay, so what this guy does is just create stacks of stuff. Okay. So now what I can do is I can go ahead and I can throw in a text field And we're gonna have to have ways of getting stuff into our linked list. So I'm gonna start building that interface for that guy. Okay, so I'm gonna have a text view. Throw this guy in there. So there's our text view, and I'll make this guy a little bit bigger. And actually, I don't want it to be a text view. We're going to do an edit text. Oh, that was our edit text. That's fine. This guy makes it, there used to be several of them on the list. Okay. So we're going to call this guy entry. Well, no, we want to read something in for our linked list. So we're going to call this guy input TV for input text view. Okay, we're going to have its nothing for its text. How do I see more properties?
I guess text view don't allow us to edit text, right?
I was looking for an edit text, isn't there?
Edit text should be good.
Oh, yeah, that's what I was looking for. So I'll just use the plain text. That's what I want. All right, so we're going to call this guy input ET for edit text. Type, that's fine. Hint, so hint is like a placeholder. So if you want to kind of prompt them for what they need to enter, we'll just say new value in there. Let's see. View all properties shows you kind of everything. So when we were just viewing this stuff, they showed us kind of a limited version of, so view fewer properties. This is kind of like the common stuff you might need to work with. So one thing that I do pretty often is I like, did they have you work with gravity at all? Okay. So let's say I want that text centered. Instead of, let's see, this guy's going to be, yeah. Well, that's actually for text. We're going to leave the text out. So it's going to be new value. But let's say we want that centered on there. So instead of left justified, we want it in the center of the text box. All right. So what we do is, and this is actually an interesting thing that Android does that iOS does not. So what I would do in iOS is I would go in, I would say, you know, just like in Microsoft Word, you know, you would say, make this text centered, right? Well, in Android, what you do is, so we have this text box, but this thing's a view. Okay, everything that we see on the screen inherits from the class called view. And what we can do is for an individual view, we can set that view's gravity. So if we think about a view as being like being space, all right, so you know, like rockets go up into space. All right, so this view is space. We can set the gravity just for this view. Doesn't affect any other view, just that view. So we're going to make the gravity for this guy be centered horizontal and vertical. So anything we throw in that view will suck to the center because that's how the gravity is set for it.
It doesn't depend upon if you are using tab or something.
Correct.
Exactly.
Yeah. So let's see. Where's gravity? So here's gravity. And it has it centered vertically, but I also want to center it horizontally. Yep. Makes sense how that worked? But what's nice about that is you can also then, instead of centering vertically, you can put the gravity top, although we probably weren't big enough to actually see it. Let's see. That's left. Yeah, we don't have enough width to actually see it. That's fine. So that'll be centered there. Yeah, so that's fine. But you can mess around with different gravity stuff to do it. I think actually if you just say center, that's equivalent to center vertical and horizontal. That's one way of doing both. Okay? So whatever, you can mess with that, but that's how gravity works. All right, now remember, this whole thing here is a vertical linear layout. So anything I throw in there is going to keep piling on top. All right, so if I want to take a button We used to have more things. We used to have like large button, small button, well, whatever. So I'll take a button. The button goes into that linear layout right underneath it. That make sense? Okay. So, and let's actually, what I'm going to do, to get rid of that button for a second, because we want to have a button for add and a button for clear. Be two buttons for no good reason other than just to show this, right? Okay, you're kind of teaching you how the interface stuff works here. So I want to have two buttons right next to each other. Well, the convenient way of doing that, well, right now I'm living inside of this vertical linear layout. So anything I add in here is just going to keep getting put below the previous thing. Well, I want two guys next to each other. So what I'm going to do, the next thing I'm going to add to my vertical linear layout is a horizontal linear layout. All right, so I'm going to come down here. Where are my layouts? All right, so here is horizontal linear layout. Drop that guy in there. And it made it tall, but I can always squeeze that down if I want. Okay, we'll lock it into where our buttons are. So now I can throw a couple of buttons in there. And it puts them next to each other. That make sense? All right, so it's kind of a convenient way. And then what I'll do is I'll go ahead and suck that guy up there so it only wraps our buttons. So we'll have this guy. We'll call that guy add button. We'll call that, say, add, and we'll call this guy clear button, and we'll have him say clear. Okay. So if I go ahead and run this, we should see that we now have a little bit different interface than we used to have. All right, so there's our text box, and we can type stuff in there. Now, we probably want this to just be numbers, maybe. Right now, we don't have a keyboard showing up because the emulator is letting us use that. So what we can do is we could choose this guy here, and we can have a keyboard style. I'm not going to, if it's not easily findable, I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but yeah, usually what I would have done is this. I would have killed that. I would have gone down here, and I would have chose the number one. We'll put that, oop. Oop. All right, sometimes when it starts acting like that, I just go to the text version of this. And we go down here to our edit text. Cut that out of there, and we will throw it inside of our linear layout right there. And now we're back to where we, whoop, whoop. There we go. Oh, almost knocked my bow tie off.
Oh, that is it lighting or no?
No, it doesn't light up. It's like an 8-bit, like Mario, like a 8-bit bow tie. All right, so yeah, the input type for that guy is number, so that's how it does it. So we want to do the hint, add value. There's that, and then we want to go ahead and we're going to call this guy new value edit text, view all properties, go to gravity. Center. All right, so now we're looking pretty legit. Okay. Now, we want these two buttons to be, well, we actually don't need the two buttons to be available in code, but we do need this text field to be available. We need to be able to read stuff in. Did the tutorial have you do that? actually get a value from the text field, or just had you create a text field?
No, get a value and print it using Excel.
Okay, got it. All right, so I need to give myself programmatic access to this edit text. So we're using MVC here. We're working with the view. I need to go over to the controller, the guy who controls this view, and I need to give myself access to that text box, that edit text there that we're looking at. All right, now I've named that guy new value ET, and he's an edit text. So I'm going to steal that name here real quick. We're going to go over to the code behind for that guy. Where's my, oh, right here. Go to this guy. And I'll just make it up top so I have access to it. So we're going to make a private edit text. And we'll call this guy new value ET. And then on create, so there's the whole life cycle that happens with our activities. Okay, so as an activity is coming into existence, an activity we can think of as just being a screen in an Android app. So as this guy's coming online, the first thing that happens is he's created. All right, so on create is the first thing it gets called. So he's going to set the content view of this guy to, so this actually is this dot set content view. It omitted the this dot, but I like to use it. So this dot set content view says, hey, I'm an app compat activity. I'm going to set my content view to be the view that we've described in this layout file. That makes sense? That's what associates this guy with this controller. That's MVC. That's another evidence of MVC. This is how these guys are glued together in Android. Make sense? Similarly, I'm going to say this dot new value ET is equal to this dot find view by ID r dot ID dot that guy. And that guy is going to come out as an edit text. So I'll go ahead and typecast it to an edit text. Otherwise, it comes out as a generic view. Everything we see on the screen is a view. It's a normal plain Jane view. Well, this guy's more than just a normal view. He's specifically an edit text. So I'm going to say, yeah, fine, he was a view, but I know he's an edit text, so I'm going to go ahead and typecast him to be an edit text, and then I'll store him right there. Make sense? All right, so what I just did here is I gave myself programmatic access to this guy inside my code. So now I have a variable that allows me to talk to that text box. All right. Now we need a couple of functions here. So we're going to say public void. Let's say add button pressed, and this guy will take a view as a parameter. And then we'll have another one, public void, let's see, clear button pressed, and this guy will take in a view as a parameter. And what we're going to have the clear button do is when this guy gets called, we want to go ahead and set our edit text to nothing. So this dot new value ET dot was that set text to nothing. All right, so I'm going to set this text box. I'm going to set his text to the empty string. All right, up here, just to prove that we have it working, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say system.out.println this dot what do I call it? New value ET dot get text. All right, so that'll print it out to the console. So we'll look at the console here in a second. This is more for debugging. All right, so now I have two functions. Now, all I've done is I've written these methods. I haven't actually connected them to my interface. That make sense? There's a couple ways we can connect them to the interface. We can do it the programmatic way, where I can go ahead and give myself access to the buttons. I can then add a click listener to the buttons. Is that how did the tutorial have you do that, or did it have you use the on-click property?
I don't think we haven't reached that far. We just
suggested
reached.
some code, so we.
You had to paste some code in there. Okay, so it looks scary. It was kind of like scary looking, right? So like here, if I come in here, it probably look like this. So if I say private button, let's call this guy add button. Button, let's see, option enter. Then what I'll do here is I'm going to say add button. I like to use this dot add button, and then we're going to say add. Was it on click listener? Oh, hold on, I need to give it a value first. This dot add button is equal to the button version of this dot find view by ID r.id.add button. All right, so that gives me programmatic access to our add button, and I can say this dot add button dot add on, isn't it on click listener? Set on click listener. There it is. This guy's going to be a new on click listener, and when we click, you can do something like this. Oh, see, that totally blows that it works that way. But your code probably looks something like that. Is that kind of what you found, copied and pasted in there? Is that what you remember doing?
I don't think.
This is not the way I'm going to teach you to do it. I'm just trying to figure out how you actually did it.
No, we didn't see this.
Okay.
There was tons of things.
Well, you said there was a bunch of code you pasted in there. All right.
There was so much.
So here, I'm going to show you the easy stuff. So I don't need the add button here. I'm going to remember this function name called add button pressed. All right. So I wrote this guy. I'm going to now go back over to my interface. I'm going to click on this add button. I'm going to go to his on click thing here. And there's add button pressed. Is that what you did?
No, I didn't.
Yours was more complex than that. Was that what you guys did? What I just did? Did you do your freaking homework?
No, we did it, but
Give
it
me
was
some
like-
feedback, people.
It was like I didn't understand it much. There were like so many windows.
All right. So in any case, that's how I associate functions for clicks. I write the function has to look similar to what I just wrote. So it's going to be public, it's going to be void, you name it whatever you want, but it always has to take in a view as a parameter. Okay? The view that comes in here is actually the view that would be the button itself, but we don't need access to the button here. We just want it to do something. Okay? So that's where I connected it up right here. So that add button calls that. The clear button on click we'll call clear button pressed. What's it doing?
Just we need to select that activity from here.
First, I think we have to write it into the.
Yeah, so I click the button, and then it has an on-click property over here. And when you hit the drop down, it should show you all of the options from the class that's attached to this guy.
It's only going to show when we will write it.
When we write it, yeah. So I wrote two functions here. Those two functions are now showing up over there. So the way I associated this click function here with that button over there is by setting this guy's on-click property to the name of this. Make sense? Again, that's MVC. That's those guys glued together. All right, so I'll go ahead and run this. Oh, betting something I did up here, I deleted something when I shouldn't have deleted something. Edit text, this stat file. Yeah, in my deletion diarrhea there, I removed a curly brace. All right, so now if I put in 5 there, and then I hit clear, row, clear button pressed, dot new value ET.
That's a number edit text, and we are putting string in it.
I think you're right. So is there just a clear text? Let's see if I can just set it to null. See if that didn't think about that. Yeah, it doesn't like that. Yeah, I mean you could set it to 0, but that I really want it to be nothingness. Well, maybe that's not the issue, because that should allow that to be that. Let's go over here and make sure these guys are hooked up the way I want them to be hooked up. It's clear button pressed for that guy. That's add button pressed for that guy. Just comment that out for a second here. Let's make sure this other one works. When I click that, it should print out whatever's in that box. Oh, I don't want the console. I want the terminal. Let me unassociate these two guys. I wonder if when I was writing that listener thing, if something funky happened. Okay, we're good there. All right, let's just add the add guy. Why are you dying? Does it not take a view anymore? That should not work. Yeah, now we're down to just the one. Okay. It's not new value ET is the EditText version of R dot. So I'm thinking it thinks this guy is null. Let me just print that out. And we'll find out why it's null. Let's see, give me a error message. Yeah, see, let me do it the way I've always done it. Maybe there's a new little helper there for it, because I've never had a drop down for those function names. I always just grab, there's the name of my function, and we'll go to onClick there for that guy. Here's my, yeah, see, it's like passing in the whole main activity thing there. I would have always said that. Let's see if that fixes it. One of the reasons why I hate Android is every week they change something. All right. So their interface wrote that code, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so then this guy, I'll go ahead and select it here, and then I'll go in here, and I'll fix it. So we'll take that guy out.
Why is it happening?
That's a new feature, that whole drop-down thing. So they must have added the thing to help you marry the two, because before you always you wrote the function, you copied the name of it, you pasted it in the onClick property. Now they've tried to make the onClick property more fancy and broke it in the process, because they fill it in with something that, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, they update every single. I think most of the apps on Android get updated every day.
All right, so I think this should work now. So let's go ahead and run that. All right, so if I put 45 in there, I hit clear, it goes out of there. If I hit 32 and I hit add, it just did some printing stuff down here. So right now it's printing out because I wanted it to print out, I thought originally this guy was a null value. So now we'll go ahead and print out the text for that guy. So now when I run it, there's my 32. Okay, so we got those guys hooked up now. Okay, so now what we imagine we might do is we have, as we're adding crap to our interface here, I imagine for our homework assignment we're going to be building well, you're going to be building a something based on a linked list. But so for us as a starting point, we have our linked list here. As I add a number, I want to add, so look, maybe I add a 32 initially, instead of put a 32 right here. Then I add a 50. It'll put a 50 underneath it. So I want to just keep having things come underneath it. All right. So now we have kind of two situations, two things that can happen with this. So on one hand, there is a way to display a bunch of rows in something, and it's called a, let's find the thing out here. Let's go to here, and it's going to be called a list view. All right, so we can create a list view that has some stuff in it and then add things to that list view. All right, that's one thing we can do. We can also create a scroll view and add things to our scroll view. Okay, now list view would probably make the most sense for us here, but it's the one I don't really want to use. The issue with a list view is typically list views are built in terms of linked lists. So you would create a list view, you would associate it with a linked list. That is the content for this list view. And so if there's 5 things in this linked list, it would show 5 things here. Well, we're going to be writing our own linked list. So our linked list isn't going to meet all the requirements of what the list view needs for a linked list. Make sense? So rather than doing that, we're going to practice with the interface a little bit. We're going to build our own little kind of ghetto interface. So I'm going to go ahead and take a scroll view here. We'll drop that guy in there. All right. And our scroll view, let's call this guy, we'll just call him scroll view. All right. Now inside of that, let's see. Well, here, before I change that, inside of that scroll view, I want to go ahead and I want to put a vertical linear layout. Oh, it's not going to let me put one in there. So is that guy just going to act vertical to begin with? Oh, it put it in there. It just didn't look like it. All right, so that guy has a vertical linear layout in it, so I'm going to go ahead and grab that linear layout. Do I have it yet? All right, that's fine. Come in here, here's my linear layout. I want to set this guy's ID. We're going to call this guy list values. That's going to be the ID of my linear layout. Okay. So I'm going to give myself access to that linear layout inside of code using his name list values so that I can add things to it. And it lives inside of a scroll view. So as that guy keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger, the scroll view should house it for me so I can scroll through it. It will be slow. As we get more stuff in there, it's going to get sluggish, which is why the list view makes more sense, but this is what we'll do for right now. So now that I have that, on the scroll view, for the height of this guy, I want to say wrap content. Okay? Now right now there's an empty vertical linear layout in there. So that's why he's flat. There's nothing in there. So what we want to do is we want to go ahead and inflate stuff in there.
What is like linear list and this one, scroll one. Ultimately, when we enter the linear list, it will go to the scroll one because we have to.
All we're doing is building an interface here. So what I've done is I've gotten a container out called a scroll view. And the way this container works is as I throw crap in there, he allows me to scroll so I can see stuff, more stuff than would normally fit on my screen. All right. Then I've put inside of that guy a vertical linear layout, which allows me to keep adding crap to it, and he just keeps going, which makes it bigger, 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 which makes the scroll view start scrolling. That kind of makes sense? All right, so this is a pretty ghetto interface I'm doing, but it's a means to an end for us right now. All right, so let's go back to our code here. And I'm going to give myself a private view. We're going to call this guy values view. we'll say this dot values view is equal to the view version of this dot find view by ID r dot ID dot list values. Okay. Now, what we want to do here is every single time we have a new list value that gets created, we want to go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and create a button. And then we're going to add that button to the list. And the button is for a good reason. And we'll see here in a few minutes. So I'm going to say button B is equal to new button. We'll say b dot set text equal to, we'll just say, well, here. Say this dot new value et dot get text. I should be able to use a normal button, right? All right, then I'm going to say this dot values view dot it's really the same thing. I need to inflate this dot get layout inflator dot inflate probably want to build it. That's fine. All right. We're going super ghetto with this, actually. I'll give this to you for your homework, so you don't have to worry about
I can see my pain in my homework.
All right, so we're going to create a layout resource file here, and we're going to call this linked list row. And he's going to be a linear layout. Oh, lowercase letter. Okay, so here's our linked list row. So it doesn't look like much, but what I'm going to do is I'm just going to throw a button in there. And we're going to have this guy, this button is going to be called LL row button. That'll be the ID for that guy. Okay. And then for starters, actually I want to say this dot values view dot get layout inflate r dot id dot actually it's not r dot a, it's r dot layout dot linked list row inside of this dot values view. So we're not going to do that for right now. All right, let me make sure that does what I think it's doing before we do the next thing. Oh, there's my calculator. Okay, that's all right. And I promise you, as you get a lot more stuff in there, it will get slower. I mean, it looks legit right now, but it will get slower.
How you got this keyboard now?
I think it's, I must have hit, I think it's this guy right here. We'll hide it.
Oh,
All right, but we want these buttons to actually say something on them. So what I need to do here is when I inflate this, doesn't it, this dot get layout inflator dot inflate, what does he return? He returns the view. Okay, good. Okay, so we're going to call this guy view v is equal to that guy. That's fine. Oh, I already have a view v. View, call that row. It's equal to that. Then we're going to say button b is equal to the button version of row dot get view. I need to get at his button.
so we want to display value of the.
Well, I want to change the value in his button. There it is. Find view by ID. So we're fine. It just wasn't completing. Button B is equal to the button version of row dot find view by ID r dot ID dot LL row button. That, and then we should be able to say B dot set text equal to this dot new value ET dot get text. Okay, that should do it. All right, we'll hide our keyboard here. So if I say 43 and I say add, there's my button that has 43 on it. If I say 31 and then add, there's my 31. Oh, but it's getting the same one.
Only one.
I want it for this particular instance. So second time around, when I said give me find view by ID for this row, that row should be a different guy each time. And this should be the button associated with that particular row. Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe they change.
This is fine. We'll make it very easy. Okay, not. Oh, I have to keep it in there. How do I get at that guy's button directly? So this gives me that individual row. Let me print out. We saw that the value had pulled out of there.
Just taking it to new button.
Right, it's got to be the way I'm inflating it. It's trying to be efficient, and it's building this guy one time and showing it twice.
Where exactly we are adding the button in the code?
Right here. So
The second
we have this thing called inflating. So if we think about, I have this the linear layout, the vertical linear layout. I'm saying, okay, dude, I want you to inflate this other guy inside of you. All right, and so the guy I'm going to inflate inside you is this dude right here. So it's going to, think of it like blowing up a balloon. So it goes, inflates in there. But because the guy is set up as a linked list, I wonder if I can do it like this.
So we only got one variable saying row over there.
Well, but this function got called multiple times.
Yeah, so the value is replaced every time.
It should be replaced, but it's trying to be efficient and not have. Remember, I said a few minutes ago it's going to get slow. It actually won't get slow the way it's working right now because it's trying to only ever create that view once, but make it show multiple times, and that's why the button is being reused.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. What if we can make the button go, make multiple buttons of the same name, like linked list or whatever?
Yeah, I don't think that's the way to pull this off. I think we need to tell it to make sure to give us a fresh one.
It's not only just taking it by itself.
But we're just not storing the value we're adding over there for the next thing, for the next iteration.
I think the problem is we're not storing it. Yeah, okay. We're just going to put this up here as a, this is how we need to do it thing. So I'm going to show you the built-in linked list, even though you're not allowed to use it for your homework assignment. You have to write your own linked list, but all right. So here's linked list, and this guy's going to be a linked list of views. And we're going to call this guy the view list. And then inside here, we can say this dot the view list is equal to a new linked list of views. And then down here, after we set the text, we can say this dot the view list dot add row. So now automatic garbage collection isn't going to pick it up because it's preserved. Now I think it should work. Oh, same problem. Is it the buttons we need to preserve? Maybe it's the buttons. Which actually would make it less slow if we're only holding on to the buttons. Give that a shot. See, it's always...
What could be the possible reason it is doing it?
Well, I mean, it's not even the possible reason. It's definitely trying to be efficient by having, I mean, if I just keep adding here, this scrolls smoothly because it's not actually, those buttons only exist once.
Yeah, that's one.
So the issue has to be this guy right here. No, not right there. This guy right here. When I'm getting the button from this particular row. I wonder if there's another version of that. Find view by ID.
So when you are clicking add, are the values going on the buttons, or the button or are we getting new buttons?
Every single time I click add, we are going to get the inflator. We're going to inflate a new list row. Specifically, we're going to inflate it inside of the values view. Okay, so that's our linear layout.
Will it be storing the button or the value on the button?
Well, no, this is the whole row. So that's a linear layout with a button inside of it. Then I'm trying to extract the button from that row. Maybe it's that. I wonder if we have to set something on that button to make it not repeatable.
Do we have to change it on click something?
No.
We don't have to.
Okay. So then let's do this when we that. It should be good enough just to do the here, let's look this up real quick. Oh, 5.3 farm burner.
Oh, the
Let's see. Android inflate view unique. Yeah, this is the issue. Oh, I wonder if that pre-populated. Yeah, if I remember correctly, it's something with this. Wonder if we changed that. Okay, yeah, that's not the issue. So the plus should be fine. This says add this guy as a resource if it doesn't already exist. So the first time it should add it. Those buttons need to be unique, but they're not coming back as unique.
How about to create a button every time we click add?
Well, we effectively are. I mean, what I'm doing right here is every single time we click add, we are creating a list row, which is a linear layout with a button in it. Then I'm grabbing that newly created button by talking to that new row we just inflated and asking him for his, oh, I wonder, let me try something here real quick. So row dot, no, that should work. I'm asking this row to look for his particular view named LL row button. That's the LL row button owned by him. Return that to me as a button. I'm storing that inside of B. Then I'm going to set B's text equal to the text from our current guy. And then I'm going to add, well, this was my attempt to try to preserve that button, but without this, the thing is still staying, you know, I can just do that. So I'm inflating it, then I'm getting the button. I wonder if it's because I'm inflating it first. I'm adding it first.
But it has to preserve again.
So can I say view row is equal to, oh, but I'm not in that context. This dot get layout inflator dot, that's the resource I want to inflate, and that's the view group in which I'm inflating it. Maybe I need, does that guy work differently, the one that says attached to root? Yeah, see, it's funny, it's updating the previous one. See, that's way too, it should already be slower than that. Android inflate unique view. Yeah, go ahead. We're gonna. I want to take a break after we get this working. I just want to. In fact, actually, why don't we do that? Why don't you guys take a 10-minute break? Let me figure this out real quick, and then when we come back, we'll be able to keep going.